The Bill Nye versus Ken Ham debate on creation and evolution gained national attention and was viewed by millions of people. Both Bill Nye and Ken Ham were correct, and both were incorrect in some of their theories. It has been puzzling to me why young Earth creationists cannot grasp the fact that the Bible clearly describes the account of a 6 literal day period about 6,000 years ago when man and animals were created on this earth by God, and also gives us overwhelming evidence that the universe had already been in existence for countless years before that event. For some reason, young Earth creationists accused anyone who believes in millions of years of being a heretic and accuses them of undermining the gospel.
Important factor here, we've discussed it in other sessions. As soon as you believe in millions of years, you've got death and bloodshed and disease and suffering and thorns before sin. Because when you've got millions of years of fossils, you've got diseases like cancer, bloodshed, all sorts of other diseases, violence, suffering, thorns before sin, because that's what you find in the fossil record. But the Bible says when God made everything, it was very good. Sin, death, disease, bloodshed of animals, man came as a consequence of sin. So as soon as you believe in millions of years, you've undermined the entire gospel because you've got death and bloodshed before sin.
Are you the type of young Earth creationist who covers their ears and refuses to listen to any evidence that conflicts with the young Earth theory? I am going to point out just one conflicting bit of evidence in this video taken from the debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham to demonstrate a major flaw in Ken Ham's theory. I spent my career as a police detective attempting to compile evidence to prove many cases in court. One conflicting piece of evidence was enough to destroy an entire case. I am going to show just one piece of conflicting evidence in Ken Ham's theory in this video. In other videos, I will demonstrate other conflicting evidence. I can tell you right now that many New Earth creationists will shut this video off right now. Most are afraid that if they are shown a flaw in the young Earth theory, they will begin to doubt what Ken Ham has been teaching. At one point in the debate, Ken Ham conveys one of his beliefs to the audience, that all of the fossils of dinosaurs found in the fossil record on Earth are a result of Noah's flood, which caused rapid sedimentation that covered all living things on Earth. Because Ken Ham believes that dinosaurs were alive on the Earth along with man during the time of the flood fossilized the dinosaur remains we find today.
And then, the catastrophe of Noah's flood, if there was a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Had to say that because a lot of our supporters would want me to. And what do you find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth.
Ken Ham and his associates at Answers in Genesis have made this claim for years, that the flood fossilized the dinosaur remains we find today.
Well, the Bible tells us the fountains of the deep broke open all over the earth. There were tidal waves, earthquakes. Only those animals, including dinosaurs that were on Noah's Ark, were safe. Those outside the Ark, what happened to them? Well, they drowned and covered with mud and turned into fossils. And what do we end up with? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth.
So, what would we expect from a flood like that? Well, we would expect billions of dead things, plants, animals, to be buried in rock layers that were once wet sediments of sand, silt, clay, and we would expect to see those laid down all over the earth. And the miracle of miracles is that that's precisely what we find. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers that were once wet sediments, and we find them all over the earth. We find marine fossils on the tops of all of our highest mountains, the Himalayas, the Alps, the Rockies.
Now here is a clip from the debate as Ken Ham attempts to explain the biblical account of creation and the introduction of sin into the world.
If you believe in millions of years as a Christian, in the fossil record there's evidence of animals eating each other. The Bible says originally all the animals and man were vegetarian. We weren't told we could eat meat until after the flood.
Notice what Ken Ham states here. He states, the Bible says originally all the animals and man were vegetarians. We weren't told we could eat meat until after the flood. Ken Ham and others in his organization have made this claim on numerous other occasions during other lectures they have held on the subject.
Well, what did dinosaurs eat? Well, some people say, I guess they could eat anything they wanted to eat. Well, we need to start with the Bible, don't we? When we start with Genesis, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 29 and 30, and we've gone over this in this series a number of times, God told Adam and Eve in chapter 1, verse 29, to only eat fruits, plants, and he told the animals only to eat plants. In fact, it wasn't until after the flood that God said we could eat meat, which is why we can eat meat today. Originally, Adam and Eve and the animals were all vegetarian.
What the folks from Answers in Genesis are saying is that the flood waters receded, the ark landed on Mount Ararat, all the animals and man disembarked, and it was then that God gave animals and man the okay to eat meat. Man could now eat animals, and animals could eat each other. At the same time he is making this claim during the debate, he is showing a picture of a fossil of a fish eating another fish.
Now, if you believe in millions of years as a Christian, in the fossil record there's evidence of animals eating each other. The Bible says originally all the animals and man were vegetarian. We weren't told we could eat meat until after the flood.
Ken Ham actually has this fossil on display at his Creation Museum in Kentucky. He is seen here proudly displaying the fossil as his proof that the flood caused the rapid sedimentation that caused the fossilization of all fossils found in the fossil record. So on one hand, Ken Ham claims that this fossil was caused by the rapid sedimentation caused by the flood. And on the other hand, he claims that animals were vegetarians until after the flood. So which is it? One of Ken Ham's assertions is wrong. Obviously, when this fish was fossilized, it was not during the time Ken Ham claims that animals and man were all vegetarians. According to Ken Ham, animals did not eat each other until after the flood. Ken Ham is consistent in one area. He insists that we believe the plain reading of the Bible.
It's one of the things that I like to say over and over again. We need to put on our biblical glasses and be looking at the world through our biblical glasses, not taking the world's ideas to the Bible. And when we do that, when we start with the Bible, when we start with Genesis chapter 1, verse 29 and 30, what do we read there? If we just take Genesis at face value, just like Jesus did, by the way, in Genesis 1:29 we read that Adam and Eve were told to only eat plants and fruits. We read in verse 30 that the animals were only to eat plants. In fact, if we just take Genesis as written, the animals and Adam and Eve were all what? Vegetarian, weren't they? You see, in Genesis 9 verse 3, after the flood, God said, just as I gave you the plants, now I give you the animals. In fact, even put the fear of man into the animals, changed even the behavior of animals, it would seem.
So using Ken Ham's own standard, he has stated unequivocally that animals were vegetarians until after the flood. He has produced a Bible passage to substantiate his claim. So we must conclude that this part of this conflicting evidence is true. He has not produced any evidence written in the Bible that the fossil record in the earth today was formed by Noah's flood. That part of Ken Ham's argument is strictly theory. And we know that when two pieces of evidence conflict, only one can be true. Jason Lyle, another employee of Answers in Genesis, states this in one of his lectures.
Laws of logic stem from God's nature. And we're made in God's image, and so we instinctively know these laws of logic. We act on them, like the law of non-contradiction. Now, you all, even if you have never heard of the term before, you immediately know that that's true, that contradictions, two contradictory statements cannot both be true. If I told you my car is in the parking lot and it's not in the parking lot, you wouldn't rush out to say, oh yeah, I want to see a car that's there and not there. You would immediately assume that what I told you is false, and you'd be right to do that, because that's a law of logic that cannot be violated.
If Ken Ham's claim that the Bible clearly states that animals were vegetarians before the flood is correct, then we have to conclude that the second piece of evidence, the fossil of one fish eating another fish, did not occur during Noah's flood. The evidence demands that conclusion. And if Noah's flood did not cause the fossilization of this prehistoric fish, then Noah's flood did not cause the fossilization of the dinosaurs. Ken Ham is wrong that Noah's flood caused the fossilization of the prehistoric creatures found in the earth today.